Greetings. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. I am Steve Deace alongside Aaron McIntyre, Todd Erzin. We've had some cooler weather the last couple of days, guys. Any wasp sightings there? Any wasp count at all?
I don't think so.
No.
I haven't seen anything this week.
All right, it's going to warm up a little bit more here at the end of the week. So maybe then I got to go to Dallas for the VP debate. And then we'll kind of reassess where things are at with the weather and stuff there. But it's been the first time in a couple of months we've gone 2 straight days without any wasps. So that's a good sighting that maybe I'll get to see you guys again one day. I know you guys really miss me.
Yeah, take your time. We're good.
Indeed. Indeed. We are brought to you by our friends over at Preborn. They specialize in divine encounters. That's what they do to try to save babies and their mamas both from a mom committing murder against her child and then doing something she'll probably regret for the rest of her life. And so that's where Preborn comes in. And that's where you and I come in as well, because they start with ultrasounds to convince mothers, hey, that's not another body. That is somebody else's heartbeat there. That's not an unviable tissue mass. That's a person. Okay. And the majority of the time when the mom hears that heartbeat, she comes through, her conscience does, and she doesn't go through with killing her child. However, the battle does not end there. She needs help. She needs support, counseling, prenatal, postnatal care, diapers, car seat, etc. They do all of this, all of it at Preborn for free. But none of the stuff they do is actually free. So that's where you and I come in. If you want to make a tax-deductible donation today, so many of you have that we have helped Preborn here with our partnership via them at the Blaze to save tens of thousands of babies. Let's save tens of thousands more. And you can take part right now. Make a donation today at preborn.com/Steve. Make a tax-deductible donation today to preborn.com/Steve or dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby on your mobile phone. All right, coming up on the program today at the bottom of the hour, Ned Ryan's going to join us. He's got a new book out about taking on the federal Leviathan administrative state. Next hour for Idolatry or Not, folks, we have some very ominous cultural trends that we've got to deal with and confront that not any hyperbole at all. Not any hyperbole at all. End of the country kind of stuff. So we'll get into that for Idolatry or Not next hour. And then Pop Culture Tuesday. They're not really going to let Diddy talk, are they? Because I don't. I predicted on the Deace Group on Friday, hashtag Diddy didn't kill himself is imminent. And now we are seeing stars across the fruited plain are dumping their Twitter accounts. And what's with these like kind of odd and peculiar omens that Stephen Baldwin has been posting on X over the last few weeks? And for those of you that don't know, Stephen Baldwin has a very famous son-in-law whose name is not implicated in this, but is caught up in it as somebody who was maybe at the vortex of some of the behavior that Diddy might be going to prison or becoming a hashtag for. So we'll get into all of that and more coming up on the program today. But let's get it rolling, as we always do, with Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by Ukrainian collusion. Ukrainian green shirt President Volodymyr Zelenskyy was in Pennsylvania yesterday with Governor Josh Shapiro touring a munitions plant. Zelenskyy was flown into the States on a U.S. military aircraft. Shapiro and others smiled as they signed their names to large munitions, no doubt destined on your taxpayer dollar to end up killing or injuring somebody a half world away. Just bizarre optics there. During his tour of that munitions plant, Zelenskyy was asked by The New Yorker his thoughts about GOP vice presidential hopeful J.D. Vance, and he said, quote, "He's too radical." So the head of a foreign state visits a U.S. battleground state a month before the election, signs his name to munitions he's getting for free, and comments on U.S. politics with reckless abandon. A newly resurfaced 2018 video went viral yesterday showing then-Senator Kamala Harris joining a lefty parade in California, chanting extremist rhetoric about immigration.
Come up with education, come down with deportation. Come up with education, come down with deportation.
In case you couldn't make that out, she's chanting up with education, down with deportation. The aforementioned J.D. Vance campaigned in North Carolina yesterday.
Our message to Kamala Harris is, how dare you call people a racist for wanting to close down that wide open border? Our message to Kamala Harris is, how dare you call the citizens of your own country bad people because they don't want a flood of illegal migration in their country? Kamala Harris, how dare you attack the citizens of your own country for not wanting their children to die of fentanyl overdoses? Kamala Harris, how dare you call the citizens of your own country bad people? You're a bad person for causing this border crisis. We are not bad people for complaining about it.
Moving on, ex-New York City COVID czar Dr. Jay Varma, whom yesterday you heard admit on undercover video that he attended or hosted drug-fueled sex parties during the pandemic in violation of his own rules. Well, he's been fired from his new job at a pharmaceutical company, Saiga Technologies. Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin hosted a large roundtable in D.C. yesterday on the topic of American public health. Featured speakers included psychologist Dr. Jordan Peterson and Jillian Michaels, among many others.
The decades between 1980 and now didn't beget a genetic quantum leap in which our DNA inexplicably mutated to make American bodies expand and fall ill at an unprecedented pace. And while Gen X, Millennials, and Gen Z have our problems, 75% of us are not stupid, weak, or lazy. So hopefully you are wondering, what has happened to us? And we're here to tell you. In the late 70s and the early 80s, a sinister series of events converged to change food and subsequently health in America indefinitely. A plague that crept like a fog while we slept, literally and figuratively, blindly trusting that the powers that be would never betray us. I mean, it seemed unthinkable to question whether a corporation would poison us for profit. I mean, the widespread assumption, at least when I was a kid, was that they were acting on our behalf. They wanted to make food, more affordable and more convenient. But it was this betrayal of trust that allowed them to insidiously infiltrate every part of our lives.
In the aftermath of the DOJ releasing would-be Trump assassin number 2's letter in which he offers a bounty for the assassination of Trump, the former president released a statement decrying the Biden-Harris Department of Justice, saying they're not taking this most recent attempt on his life seriously and calling for the feds to let Florida handle the investigation. Last week, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says his state's effort to investigate are being stonewalled by the feds.
The answer is no, they're not being cooperative. Yes, I am concerned. I mean, for example, we were rebuffed. Our investigators were rebuffed just going to the fence line outside of Trump International Golf Club in West Palm Beach. And so I think they've taken the position, they don't want the state of Florida to be involved in this. But here's the thing. There were multiple violations of Florida law across multiple jurisdictions. We think at least 3 judicial circuits. This guy, Ryan Routh, committed potential violations of Florida law. So we have a duty to investigate this. We have a duty to bring the appropriate charges, and we also have a duty to inform the public about how this happened.
The son of Ryan Routh, would-be Trump assassin number 2, Orrin Routh, was arrested over the weekend on child pornography charges. We just learned that this morning. Just like you and me update, this is Joshua Fryermuth, also known as Vicky of Ohio. He was arrested this week for trying to kidnap a young boy. Listen to this story. Parents showing support for female athletes were banned from school events for wearing pink wristbands with XX written on them in Bow, New Hampshire. Parents of students at Bow High School complained to the school's athletic director after they were told their girls' soccer team would play against an opponent with a dude on its team. Officials told the parents there was nothing that could be done to prevent it because of a ruling by a federal judge. Some of the parents decided to show their support for the girls by wearing pink wristbands with XX on them to the game between Bow High School and Plymouth Regional High School. School officials responded by stopping the game, demanding the parents take off the wristbands, and having police issue no trespass orders against the parents. Some parents who were wearing the wristbands later reported they're banned from school property for the duration of the school year. So those parents who didn't even do the right thing and pull their girls from the team did the bare minimum and wore measly wristbands to virtue signal support of girls' sports, and even that was too much for the radical tranny mob in Bow, New Hampshire. There's a lesson in there somewhere. And finally, Kamala Harris surrogate Kelly Hyman joins Fox News.
What is Harris's plan? We're waiting.
Yeah, okay, there's
there's a lot of aspects to it in regards to looking at it online. So let's talk about lowering the grocery costs, because that's something that's brought up. The viewers can look at this online. She talks about certain things in regards to advancing the first federal ban on price gouging on food and groceries, to set clear rules to the road to make it clear that big corporations can't unfairly exploit consumers as well.
Is that happening? Is that happening?
Could it not at this moment? No, this is her plan that's laid out for the first 100 days when she becomes president of the United States of America.
Gouging, is that currently happening?
In regards to I don't know exactly if that's currently happening or not, because I'm not privy to that type of information. Okay. But there are people are costing a lot of money in regards to groceries.
Okay. It seems like you're having a hard time articulating her plan. And
I'm not. Honestly, that's not true. Please, I'm constantly being interrupted by you, which as a woman, I think is disrespectful. When I'm trying to speak, every time I try and speak, you speak over me.
Okay. Final thought.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. I was giving you time there.
And that's what happened while we were away.
All convicted child pornographers, rapists, and groomers should be executed. All of them. All. And why do I think that dude dressed up like a chick to try to pick up little boys? Why do I think one school district is missing its substitute teacher this morning? Can I get an amen on that?
Yep.
One school system is like, well, why are we down a sub here this morning? That's probably why. Aaron's montage brought to you by our friends over at Patriot Mobile. Make the switch today so that you are no longer giving your money to people, directly giving your money to people who hate you. Give it instead to people who support you and your values. And that's what Patriot Mobile does. I've seen it with my own eyes. They reinvest back into the kingdom, back into our causes, back into our values. They also have an outstanding customer service team that's U.S. based, which means you will be able to understand what they say. That's a lost art these days. And also, you'll get all the same coverage from the communist corporations who hate you without giving your money directly to communists. So if you want to make this switch today, you can get a free month of service when you do. When you go to patriotmobile.com/Steve and use the offer code Steve, a free month of service today at patriotmobile.com/Steve. Offer code Steve. Keep your phone, upgrade your phone. You can keep your number, switch your number. They'll customize it for you. patriotmobile.com/Steve. Use the offer code Steve. Aaron talked about some lessons learned at the end of his montage there. Let's talk about a couple of lessons here. So yesterday on the show, we talked about a woman, a congresswoman here in my home state of Iowa, Marionette Miller Meeks, who is, I mean, ultimately, you know, she's a doctor, she's successful, she's going to be okay, right? Ultimately, when she loses her congressional seat in November, which she likely will, it'll be her constituents and the rest of us, when her seat goes to just an avowed communist, will be the ones suffering for her more than she will be. But we told you the story about how, despite the pain and suffering her looming defeat will cause, it also comes with really almost delicious providential amounts of irony. Like this is the laws of sowing and reaping are undefeated, playing out right in front of us right now, right? And so here's a woman, and I've known her for nearly 20 years, has railed against the influence of pro-life Christians in the party, just kept running for this congressional seat over and over and over again. Sometimes she'd win the primary, sometimes not. Okay. And at the fourth time was finally the charm. She won it. What did Bob say yesterday, guys? By 8 votes? I thought it was like
8 or 9.
It was 8. Okay. So less than 10. Then they tried stealing it from her. And I still remember a bunch of you emailed me and said, Steve, why aren't you talking about this stop the steal in your own backyard? Because I've known this woman for 20 years. I know what kind of a terrible congresswoman she's going to be, which I turned out to be right about because I've known her for 20 years. And so now she's never been pro-life, never, ever, ever, never been pro-life. And, one of these big baby groups just slaps the, pro-life label on her. I guess if we lose all these amendments, you know me, I will always look for a way to declare victory. I mean, it's going to be just downright tragic. A lot of people are going to die, okay? But you know me, I don't like taking L's. I'll find some way to get a win. So if we lose all these amendments around the country, the amount of political clout these big baby groups is going to have, dead in the water. All right, dead like the chariots of Pharaoh in the Red Sea. Okay, dead. So maybe then we can actually get a real movement after this that might actually stop the killing for a change. But I digress. Anyway, she's never been pro-life. One of these, big baby groups slaps the magic R on her because she won a primary, and now suddenly she's got an A+ pro-life score when she's never been pro-life ever. And she is getting absolutely decimated in her district for being in favor of an outright ban against all abortions. She's not. Never has been. Not sure she wants to ban any. Maybe the most late-term ones, maybe, then I wouldn't be so sure. But she's certainly never actually been pro-life. She might have some extensions of abortion that she's against because they're icky, but the woman's never been pro-life. And so she's going to probably lose her seat because she was given a label she didn't want, didn't deserve, as part of a political scam to frankly lie to our people and maintain people's comforts and fundraising mechanisms in Washington, D.C. while losing everywhere else. And she's getting annihilated for a position she doesn't have. And it's deceptive as hell, except it's every bit as deceptive as the pro-life group calling her pro-life. So everybody's lying. All right? Everybody on both sides is lying. And getting a badge she didn't earn and therefore does not have rabid support of actual pro-lifers paying attention. And then getting annihilated for that badge that she did not earn and does not believe in. Just, you can't make this stuff up, okay? But this isn't just applicable to that issue. This is a general principle. And I'm telling you, moving forward, guys, Donald Trump's the only thing holding this whole coalition, whatever is left of it, together. This is not a sustainable coalition. There are simply too many people aligned who just don't like each other, don't share values, fundamental agreements. It's just, this is Yugoslavia, is what the right is. It's a bouillabaisse of different variants and opinions that are united against communism. But you can sit with Stalin at Yalta for a while, man, but over a common enemy, sooner or later, you'll just turn on each other because you don't have anything in common either, right? The Cold War lasted even longer than World War II by decades. So what happened in Pennsylvania yesterday with Zelensky is the same story as Marionette Miller makes. It's the same story. So here's what's gone down for the last couple of years. For the last couple of years, we had to keep the government open. We couldn't shut it down. Now, we were told that we had to keep it open because Republicans never win elections after a government shutdown. And everybody goes back to the 1994 or the post-1994 shutdown in 1995, and then Bill Clinton won re-election. Now, let's just pause for a second and say the fact that most of the Republicans in office now were in office 30 years ago, problem. Can I get a witness on that? Right?
Yes.
Okay, problem. Yes. So the fact that so many Republicans still in office now remember those days, and those are on their resume, major problem. Okay, way overdue for a generational clear out here. All right, but number two, it's also factually inaccurate. In the 1996 in 1996 and in 1998, Republicans held on to control of Congress. It's the first time they had done that since post World War II. So the idea that they then lost the next two elections because of that government shutdown and everything that went on, that's just absolute fiction. Now, you don't probably get told that a lot because most of the channels and stuff that you watch, like Fox, don't want you to really know how politics works. And they want you dumb because then you're pliable and they can just kind of move you guys around like, like a herd. And it works. I mean, Fox basically just determines who wins every major primary on the right if they want to. So that's not even true, but it's not also what's here. Here's the thing. It's not factually true, but it's also not precisely true in terms of motivation here. And remember last year, McConnell let the cat out of the bag. Old Ditch did, before he became Glitch. Oh, you're crying. is the most important issue in the world right now. Remember when he said that? Folks, that's why they can't shut the government down. Because of, as Todd likes to put it, reverse Wakanda, Ukraine. The playground of elites where there's been some Habsburg dynasty infighting, incestuous piss and massive matches between two groups, each hell-bent with some form of their own dominionist destiny, and neither one of them, frankly, lines up with our values. That's Putin and old Russia, and then the Soros World Economic Forum crowd on the other side from Davos, because Ukraine is one of George's biggest playgrounds in the world. Okay, Zelensky is essentially his puppet. And there's some amount of vibranium there, okay? Some amount of grift there that is worth risking World War III for everybody on every side of this, right? Now, I'm a big believer that when Philistines and Edomites want to kill each other, guys, what do you think we should do? Not a damn thing. That's what I think. Not a damn thing. In fact, I think we should encourage it. And the higher the body count, the better. Not our fight. And as long as Russia and Davos want to blow each other up, by all means, cool. But I'm not in charge, and people that don't think like me are. And so we, of course, had to pick a side. And this is why the government has stayed open this entire time. It's not about paying troops. That can all be done with a government shutdown. That's a lie. It's not about losing elections. Nobody's lost an election over a government shutdown. That's not even factually accurate. All right. The real reason is because of this issue, in deep defiance of the GOP base. And yet, the entire Republican Party got Miller Meeked yesterday in the state of Pennsylvania, which may ultimately determine the entire election. As you watch Zelensky flown in, and apparently he does have a different color shirt. Zelensky flown in to do partisan political lobbying and posturing in perhaps the most important swing state of this election cycle, Pennsylvania. And there you see Josh Shapiro naming missiles after Zelensky and others. And the Republican Party is going to get what in return from Zelensky? Remember, Republicans control the House. I know. You guys remember there used to be this thing called the Constitution. For those of you that went to public school, the Constitution is... Never mind. Anyway, what it says in there, guys, refresh my memory, but not a dime or plug nickel of the federal treasury can be allocated anywhere without approval from which orifice of government? Which one is it? Can you guys refresh my memory? Which orifice is it?
House. That's
right, the House. Who's been in charge of the House here for the last couple of years?
Hakeem Jeffries.
There it is. Yes. Who's officially been in charge?
Republicans.
Republicans have officially been in charge. So lawfully, they can't allocate any money.
Actually, hasn't a biblical worldview been in charge, Steve?
They can't allocate any money, a plug nickel, without the House. The Republicans have been in control of the House, whether it's Mr. Biblical Worldview now, Mr. Technocrat before, I don't know, whether it was nobody for a month, okay? Whatever it was, Republicans have been the majority the last 2 years of this war. And they have been the ones that have been willing to fund all of this, all of it. And Mr. Zelensky, how did he respond? How did Zelensky, I don't know how many Y's are after that dude's name, but how did he respond? Hey, man, not my fight. You know, obviously I have my opinions, but we need as many allies in the United States right now as we can get. And I know standing up for the people of Ukraine hasn't always been the most popular issue there in the United States, and appreciate the bravery and the courage of politicians on both sides. And when I addressed Congress, I had politicians on both sides of the aisle stand and applaud, and people on both sides have really stood up for us and gone to the mattresses for the people. No, didn't do any of that. Nope. Just went right on over there to Pennsylvania, cashed that check, injected himself into our domestic politics, and autograph some missiles that you paid for. It's the same story as Miller Meeks. You know why? It's the same paradigm. We're aligned with people who hate us. Unfortunately, I think we're out of time to come up with something else. Especially when you see the stat chart I'm going to show you next hour. Okay? But I don't strategically know a way out of this. I really don't. I couldn't even ponder it for you. Like, I wouldn't even try to do that show. You know, I don't know. I don't know a way out of it. I really don't. We're here fighting for our right and the right for our way of life to survive. I mean, we have people openly running for office on 25% taxes on money you've never even received and may never receive. Preemptive taxation. Now we're doing preemptive taxation. From progressive taxation to preemptive taxation. I dropped a quip 15 minutes ago that latest groomer they busted was probably somebody's substitute teacher that didn't report for work this morning. Nobody laughed. Instead, you winced. Ain't a quip, it's a cliche at this point. I mean, we're taking the standing 8 count here, Rock. We are at the cut me Mick stage of culture war. So I don't know what to tell you. I don't know a way out of this. But what is happening to us now comprehensively on every front, and I'm bringing this up because when this is over, win or lose, if Trump wins, it'll buy us some time that we have to address some of these long-form issues on our side. When we have a moment, at least a speed bump in the White House, and hopefully more. If he loses, we're on the defensive on so many areas as it is. We'll have no choice but to consider these things. But there needs to be, when this election ends, 42 days, well, who am I kidding? It's not ending 42 days from today. When it ends, whenever the Democrats get the votes they need, Christmas, New Year's, at some point, when the festival known as elections ends, we need to have a serious, long-form, structural conversation on the right. This is not sustainable. And we are aligned with people who are so treacherous, so gutless, that it then ends up being that you can no longer say, well, a bad Republican is better than any Democrat. They funded Zelensky for 2 years against all of our wishes, only to have him go to the most determinative state and campaign openly for the other side, guys. This is now where they're just turning around and firing right at us. They're not even in the way. They're joining the people shooting at us from the other side. We need to have a long conversation about this, guys, when this is over. What are your thoughts?
The men of Pennsylvania don't even know what you're talking about. They've already found their way out. So they're called the Eagles and the Steelers. I have max cynicism at this point. That's the only way we get to this point. We have such big, shiny idols. The fact that it's not even mystery war. We don't understand that isn't even being covered anymore. He's getting on our plane. He's coming right over here. He's unzipping his fly, and he's peeing in your face and then saying, give me the money for the pleasure of it. And you're going to comply.
Hi, Max Cynicism. My name's Aaron McIntyre. That you should change your name to that. We should all change our names to that. What does that conversation even look like?
I don't know.
People think that if Trump wins in November, that this is going to be some sort of Valhalla. No, actually, the job gets really, really rough. What if he actually tries to follow through on deporting 11 million illegals? You thought that's going to make COVID look like tiddlywinks, guys. And I'm dead serious.
Yeah.
Things are going to get really, really rough even if he wins. All it is just buying us some extra time to actually try to turn this thing around. Now, if he loses, we're also having some really rough, really difficult conversations the other way around, too. Either way, don't look at this election as the savior of anything. It's just buying us a little bit of time.
Amen.
Amen. More in a moment. you guys know I love my Miracle Made sheets, and that's why I love telling you about them. They came on board our show last year, right as we were undergoing the hottest July in Iowa on recent record. And despite that, last summer, the first time in this home that we've never ran the ceiling fan at night to help supplement the AC, just to make it even cooler. These sheets did the trick. And then we had that brutal January that everybody was talking about during caucus time as well. Some of the coldest temperatures in Iowa history. They held up on the other end of the spectrum. Now we're in that change of season time, right? You know, it got down to like 50 last night. It's going to be like 70, 75 today. And so the temperature fluctuation, it doesn't matter, man. These sheets, they perform year round with their silver infused fabrics inspired by NASA that are temperature regulating so that you can sleep at the perfect temperature all night long. And they're very comfy, very comfy. There's definitely a difference when I'm out on the road. And I've been on the road a lot here recently. I got a couple more things to go out on the road here for soon too. There's a difference between the sheets on the road and when I come home to these. And they are phenomenal. Right now, if you use the promo code DACE at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels. And you can save over 40% as well. All right, so you can't beat it. They've got a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you're not 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. You will be, by the way. All right, so right now, go to trymiracle.com/DACE. Trymiracle.com/DACE. Use the code DACE to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. Trymiracle.com/DACE. Claim your free 3-piece towel set and save 40% off with the promo code DACE at trymiracle.com/DACE, promo code DACE. Name of the book, American Leviathan, The Birth of the Administrative State and Progressive Authoritarianism, from Ned Ryan. That's his latest, and he joins us now here on The Blaze. Good to see you again, Ned. How are you?
Yeah, great to be with you, Steve. Doing well, and no need to be subtle in that subtitle with the birth of the administrative state and progressive authoritarianism. And the point I wanted to make in that, we'll talk more about it. Once you put in place a government of unaccountable, unelected bureaucrats and consolidate that power, as you do with the administrative state, you ultimately end up with a very authoritarian government dictating to the American people, listen, you dirty little serfs, you little peasants, this is what you're going to do. We're just trying to save you. And if you don't listen to us, we'll force you to submit. That's where you end up with an administrative state, Steve.
So let's start there at the beginning then, because the founders wanted some bureaucracy. They created multiple branches of government. They created circuit courts. They created independent branches, state governments, municipalities, local governments. They wanted some grinding down, some institutional rigor mortis to grind down passions of the people so there would not be wide fluctuations. They did not want, every election to feel like your entire way of life or either side of the argument was at stake like we feel now, right? And so what's the difference between the bureaucracy that they created and the administrative state? What is the difference, and when did that difference make that transition?
The basic understanding of human nature and the diffusion of power, Steve. The Constitutional Republic, again, our founders believed we're imperfect human beings in an imperfect world. You can call it sin nature. They did move in a Judeo-Christian worldview, and I would remind people, Declaration of Independence and our Constitution codified a set of beliefs and common understanding about how the world worked, where rights came from, how government was supposed to operate. The Declaration was really the framework for the Constitution. Our rights come from our Creator. They're unalienable. And to secure those rights, governments are instituted among men. So our founders, sitting in Philadelphia, 1787, wanted to create a rights-based government to protect those God-given rights and take none of them away. They didn't trust human nature. Imperfect human beings, imperfect world. We're capable of great good. We are incapable of sustained good. And the problem, Steve, is with our human nature that is deeply imperfect, we often do what we can, not what we should. They never wanted consolidated power in the hands of imperfect human beings. So they put in place a constitutional republic with separation of powers, the diffusion of power, not only between the main Article 1, Article 2, Article 3 branches of our federal government, the legislative, executive, judicial, but also, as you mentioned, breaking down with federalism this idea of diffusing power even more so outside of that already diffused power inside of our federal government. They believe that was the greatest protector of our natural inherent rights. In fact, Steve, I'll mention this really quick. At the Constitutional Convention, there was a serious debate between Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and George Mason. Hamilton and Madison did not want an enumerated Bill of Rights, which some people might find a little shocking. George Mason wanted that. The reason Hamilton and Madison didn't want that is because they believed the greatest protector of our natural inherent rights that God gave to us, what no earthly power gave, no earthly power can take away. The greatest protector of our natural inherent rights is the machinery of the republic, that separation of powers. The progressive movement that arose in the early 20th, late 1800s, early 1900s, turn of the 20th century here in America, rejected that wholesale. They were out to destroy the political and moral authority of the U.S. Constitution. They were out there to destroy the separation of powers because they believed the founders got it right. They thought the founders got human nature wrong. They felt that they got the state wrong. They believed that the state was the vehicle for progress and that the state was salvation. Therefore, you had to put in place an administrative state, a massive bureaucracy filled with an educated elite that the only separation they believed in, Steve, was the separating out of that administrative state from any political accountability, and that those unelected bureaucrats, this educated elite, were to use applied science to lead to greater progress for society and ultimately to the apotheosis of mankind, which is literally the deification of mankind in the here and now. When you read the writings of the progressives and what they put in place, it's like reading the rantings of deluded madmen. They were in defiance of human nature. They were in defiance of why government exists. And here we find ourselves. And last point I'll make on this is Steve, is this. The conflict you see between Donald Trump and permanent DC, Russian collusion, Ukrainian quid pro quo, lawfare, all of those things comes down to two fundamental things. Who decides? Is it the duly elected representatives of the American people or the unelected bureaucrats? And a clash of two very different governing philosophies, constitutional republic versus administrative state. That's what it all boils down to, and that's what we're seeing playing out right now. Even though some people want to say it's all these other issues, that's the fundamental issue at stake right now.
That's an excellent hermeneutic, Ned. And I mean, you're pointing out even with an issue, when we get in the administrative state, a lot of times people want to act like this is just purely a technocratic issue. It just comes down to the ratio of NGOs to American voters. You're pointing out there is no such thing as a non-theological issue because each side is beginning with a theological premise here. Okay. And their side is beginning with the premise that man is basically good and therefore perfectible and can impose a utopia, especially when they've had the kind of training and which we would call indoctrination and catechesis into this worldview that makes them even better than the average person already is. And if you follow us or trust the experts, you too can attain this sort of secular salvation. Correct? Yeah. Yeah.
This is so they were heavily influenced by, I refuse to call him a philosopher, the Prussian propagandist Georg Hegel, who was a paid propagandist by the Prussian king at the time, who believed that the state was the march of God on earth. The state was to decide objective truth and science, all of these things. And they got indoctrinated in those views because you couldn't get a higher degree here in America at the time, and because there was really no college or university system. So they had to go over to France and Prussia, got indoctrinated, came back, and thought that that was the solution. And Hegel taught that the state is a living organism that is to subsume everything else, corporations, individuals, individual rights. Everything is to be subsumed. The state will give back to these various entities any rights that it deems necessary to the benefit or advancement of the state. They didn't want to have separation of powers because you can't have, you have to have efficiency in the path towards progress. Consolidated power in their minds was how you did that. And the other thing, too, that I think it really explains, Steve, with today, people go, why is government exploding in size? Well, that's the whole point. It's built into the DNA of the administrative state. If the state is salvation, why would you ever limit salvation, Steve? You wouldn't want to limit salvation. In fact, salvation should enter every aspect of your life until every aspect of your life is saved. Healthcare, education, you name it. So there is perpetual growth built into the DNA of the administrative state. And that's how you find yourself sitting here in 2024 going, this massive behemoth of bureaucracy, truly the American Leviathan, is crushing us while it wants more funding. Why do you think they want to hire 87,000 more IRS agents to get those taxes from $600 PayPal transactions? Because salvation, in their minds, salvation must be funded, Steve.
This history, by the way, is that Ned is pointing out to you folks, it's really important. So Prussia was a driving force in the reunification of Germany in the late 19th century. Okay. And a lot of the greatest military leaders in that era of which in Germany was viewed after reunification as kind of a benevolent dictatorship. It was a very progressive society. It was probably originally it was really the biggest superpower on earth at this point. Had the most benevolent, wealthy middle class. It was leaders in all forms of education, right? And so on the outside, it looks like that this is the post-Darwinian descent of man, post-Malthusian ethics. This is the path forward for mankind. It looks like that.
Yes.
Except this consolidation of power into the state, or what our colleague Oran McIntyre refers to as the total state. This consolidation of all power within the state in which we live and breathe, that the state becomes God, also created a forever war machine. And as we saw, as we saw going into the 20th century, we were one generation from the reunification of Germany around 1870 or so, one generation away, 1914. Germany under two completely different styles of regime. The more benevolent autocracy of the Kaisers, the straight up totalitarianism of the Nazi Party. Okay, under two totally different types of regimes. But that idea of the supremacy of the state plunged the world into cataclysmic chaos and warfare for the entire first half of the 20th century, with Germany at the focal point of both of those flashpoints, Ned.
Well, the point I was going to make, Steve, when you read the progressives, they were shocked, disappointed, disheartened by World War I and the rise of the German military state, because they realized that ultimately came from Hegel's ideology and philosophy, which they had adhered to. And for them, it was a moment, not that it dissuaded them from in any way rejecting that worldview, but it was a very discouraging moment in time. But to then continue that, where do you think the Nazis got their race laws? I mentioned this in the book. Hegel, again, talked about the living state as the state as a living organism, that you wanted to reject parasites. This is what progressives believed. Their pseudo-intellectual belief system led them to pseudoscience, eugenics, that somehow Negroes and Jews were inferior races. A lot of the progressives, deeply racist, deeply bigoted. So a lot of the race laws and immigration laws written in the late 19-teens, early 1920s are progressive race laws. Where do you think the Nazis got their inspiration for their laws to justify what they wanted to take to its ultimate conclusion? American progressive race laws. To their credit, if I can say that, if they get any credit, the American progressives realized if we actually take this whole living organism, reject parasites to its ultimate conclusion, it means we're going to have to start dealing with what we consider the lesser elements of society and eradicating them. And they couldn't do it. Not so much with the Nazis, but they used that framework of progressive laws to build the framework for their own laws that ultimately led them to the final solution.
I've got 2 minutes. What's the path forward out of all of this?
Three things. Most of the administrative state resides inside the executive branch. The head of the executive branch is the duly elected president of the United States. Put a powerful executive in. I deal with a whole series of reform items in the last chapter. Supreme Court stepping up to the plate. Chevron deference decision this summer, huge step in the right direction. Said we're not going to defer to any more of these unelected bureaucrats' statutes and regulations. Also said the Security and Exchange Commission tribunals are unconstitutional, meaning we have to have an independent judiciary, and we also have to actually respect our Bill of Rights, right to trial by jury. But even more so, Steve, the American people need to be illuminated. That's one of the reasons I wrote the book, to understand what's going on in D.C. and to reject any legitimacy the administrative state might have and go, we want to have our rights restored. We want a republic restored. We want a government of, by, and for the people. But you can't get there until you fully understand what's going on to say we reject this. We want a restoration. So those three things, the American people, Donald Trump, and the Supreme Court, if you get all three of those in the next 4 years, you can make rapid steps. The last point I'll make is this. The foundation of the swamp is the state. If you break the state, you will drain the swamp. You have a shot at restoring the republic.
Great stuff, Ned. Appreciate that. And good luck with the book.
Thanks, Steve.
You're welcome, man.
Thank you.
Check it out, folks. It's called American Leviathan, The Birth of the Administrative State and Progressive Authoritarianism. And it's available right now. Again, the American Leviathan by Ned Ryan. For those of you that don't know, R-Y-U-N, by the way, is how Ned spells the last name if you're searching for it now. Brought to you by our friends over at Hillsdale College. Kind of perfect timing to talk about them, because the kind of stuff you just heard from Ned is exactly the kind of stuff they do every day over at Hillsdale. They are the nation's leader in defending our liberties on the battlefield of education and pushing back on the narratives that you just heard Ned and I pushing back on, in fact. And one of the ways they do that, too, is help to equip a lot of us out there with the tools that we need to do the same. And one of those tools is the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. You can get the Larry Arnn Show, that's ARNN, the Radio Free Hillsdale Hour, the online courses podcast. These are all top-notch. They're available on all the major podcast platforms, or we just made it really simple for you. They're available as well when you go to daceforhillsdale.com, F-O-R. Daceforhillsdale.com is where you want to go for your hopefully now second favorite behind us, second favorite podcast, daceforhillsdale.com. Again, head over to daceforhillsdale.com. All right, gentlemen, what'd you think of the conversation we just had with Ned Ryan about his book, American Leviathan?
I think it was a perfect dovetail to how we ended the segment. Last segment, you know, the election is in 42 days from today. I'm at the point now where 43 days, 44, 45, whatever it is, but probably 43 days, we're going to look back and we're going to say Donald Trump was never going to win, or Kamala Harris was never going to win. And you notice how he ended there. He said, if you do all this, if you get a strong executive, if you reform things, you have a shot at taking back the republic. I don't know how I can. You have a shot. That's better than not having a shot. But those are a lot of ifs. Those are a lot of ifs. This is like a 12-leg parlay that we're looking at here in sports betting parlance. You know, you have a shot. Is it a very big shot? No. But that's kind of all we're looking at, in my estimation, with this election.
The people are the problem. Everything that Ned just laid out, it's what we already have. We have the mechanism in place. It's called the Constitution. It's called this place of America. And yes, not everybody's expected to be a historical expert, but hey, Aaron's montage, what's going on in New Hampshire? We have to believe in that as a people and have lines we will not let you cross. What's the motto? Everything he talked about there is distilled into a motto in New Hampshire. What is their state motto? It's live free or frickin' die. But there they won't do the bare minimum when a girl plays on a boys' sports team, as Aaron laid out. I'm telling you, if you can't, in defiance of that, step up and say, damn it, no, we're Americans, then nothing Ned says is going to matter.
On that note, when we return, some ominous societal trends we have got to correct as soon as possible. Next. All right, we're back here with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast with Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre. I'm Steve Deace. Please let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox. You can do that by emailing us, steve@stevedeace.com. That's DEACE. Like us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on X, Instagram, and TikTok. And then don't forget as well, if you listen to the podcast version, if you have not yet done so, leave us a 5-star review. And we thank all of you who have. And you can also make sure to hit subscribe, or if you're on iTunes, follow. And that will assure that every time we do a new show, it shows up in your feed every single time. And this portion of the show is brought to you by our friends over at First Liberty. I kid you not. 10 minutes ago, Kamala Harris called for eliminating the filibuster in the U.S. Senate for the expressed written purpose of codifying Roe v. Wade into law. For the expressed written purpose of making state-sanctioned baby murder without any limits at all, that level of savagery and barbarism, law. That happened just 10 minutes ago. That's one of the reasons why we aligned here the last few weeks with our friends over at First Liberty, because they have been seeing what they intend to do here with the very institutional pieces we have in place to push back on what radicals like Kamala Harris want to do to the country. You just heard Ned Ryan talk about we need an independent judiciary to do more to things like the Chevron doctrine that you saw the Supreme Court do earlier this year. If you agree with that, then you agree with our friends at First Liberty. They have been on the vanguard of pushing back and standing up for our God-given rights in the courts for many years. My old boss, Ted Cruz, comes out of the First Liberty camp. You have Kelly Shackelford and Hiram Sasser and those guys. They have been on the front lines fighting these battles and winning them for years. And they're asking you to take action. All right, they're looking for 1 million patriots to stand for the safeguards of the independence of the judiciary and more, just as the founding fathers intended. And if you want your voice to be counted among that 1 million, you can go to supremecoup.com, COUP, supremecoup.com/Steve, supremecoup.com/Steve, to learn how you can help stop the radical left's assault on what's left of our constitutional republic. supremecoup.com/Steve. A funny little aside. You guys ever seen the original Bride of Frankenstein, like the old one, like Boris Karloff? You guys ever watched that before? You guys ever seen it?
No.
Never seen it? All right. So it was couples movie night for Amy and I last night. And the next thing up on this, we've been going through this book, with different themes of films. And then, you sit around, answer questions and talk about it afterwards. And it just so happened that the next category in this book we're doing is classic creature feature. So she had never seen the original Bride of Frankenstein. And so we were like, let's watch that, and she's totally tracking with it all the way through it. Many consider it to be even superior to the original, which, basically launched the first shared universe in cinematic history, the Universal Monster Universe, with Boris Karloff as the Mummy and Frankenstein, and Bela Lugosi and as Dracula, and Lon Chaney as the Wolfman, right? And Abbott and Costello eventually get involved too, and this was the first shared universe that, a movie audience had ever seen. And so she's tracking with it the whole time. We get to the end, right? And if you haven't seen the movie, I don't think you'll appreciate this, but if you have, she really thought, because of the way this movie has been marketed for the last 90 years, that this was like some macabre Romeo and Juliet, okay? And that Frankenstein and his bride were just going to ride off into the sunset, happily ever after, right off into the sun. Yeah, actually it would be the sunset in their case, because they want it dark. Happily ever after, right? We get to the end, man, and Frankenstein, or the bride, rejects Frankenstein, and Frankenstein says, "We belong dead," and just blows himself and his bride up. You should have seen the look on her face. I mean, she felt like a piece of Americana had been robbed of her. Like she really thought this was going to end okay, because the way this is marketed as that, they're a couple, they're never a couple. It never happens. And she had this, she had this like gobsmacked look on her face, and made me think of other times when you think a movie that you've heard a lot about is going to go a certain way, and it goes completely opposite of what you anticipated. We had one of those moments last night. You guys ever had one of those with your wife, where you knew something that she did not, and then when she got to the end, she was like, "How did you not warn me?" You ever gone through anything like that before?
Not to that level, but kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
What was yours? What movie was it?
I don't want to say. You are going to rip me to shreds. The Lego movie. Where they do live action at the very end.
Yes.
It's not that dark, but
I know. I love the Lego movie, but the fact that two homeschoolers got married and were gobsmacked by the ending of the Lego movie.
No, I knew how it was
the most homeschool couple of all time.
I knew how it was going to end. She did not.
Yeah. That's on brand. In fact, it's kind of adorable. The Lego movie just threw her for a loop. What about in the Erzin household, Todd?
Well, I can't think of a particular movie, but if my wife senses something like that coming up, she'll turn from innocent to full-on Mystery Science Theater 3000, and it's all over. So she has a coping mechanism for all of this.
I mean, Amy was still talking about it. She came down the stairs this morning, and I saw her before she left to go do her therapy appointments this morning. She was still talking about this. She really, because all the Halloween decorations and stuff are out now, and there's all kinds of things with Frankenstein and the bride together. She really thought this was going to be like, some kind of macabre love affair. It really threw her for a loop, man. First thing she thought when she woke up is, man, that was really a tragic ending. Indeed it was, especially for 1935. Now, if you look at some of the cultural trends we're about to show you, we are headed for some tragic endings here in the year 2025. I'm going to walk you through here in a minute a series of charts that look at the percentage of adults by the age of 30 who have crossed over into multiple milestones of adulting. And the Bible defines a generation typically as 40 years. And that's the metric that is used in this data as well. It's from 1983 to 2023. When I shared this stuff with you guys recently, before we unveil it to the audience, just your instant reactions to seeing this data laid out.
Red rum.
Yeah. Another movie quote. Yes.
Told you. That's why I drink vinegar. I mean, I don't, what? Of course. I mean, I don't, this is not, you're not doing some kind of, look, Geraldo's going into Al Capone's vault. What will we, of course. So just smack us in the face with it again. We'll see if it takes this time.
So for those of you that are going to ask, and if you are a viewer or listener to this show, you should ask, where did this data come from? It comes from a research and consulting group that used the U.S. Census Bureau's current population survey data. All right, so that's where this data comes from. A research group used official government data. Let's start here, all right? The amount of adults who, by age 30, living on their own in the year 1983, all right? In the year 1983, it was well over 80%. In the year 2023, it is approaching 60%. That's an incredible decline. The amount of adults who by age 30 have ever married in 1983 was right at 80%. In 2023, it is approaching 40%. And for those of you that are watching on Blaze TV today, or later today at youtube.com/dayshow, that's our new YouTube channel we're trying to start to get around all the censorship they've done to crush me there on YouTube. So if you could go there and subscribe, we would appreciate it. youtube.com/dayshow, youtube.com/dayshow. You're gonna actually see the trend line here, man. And it's like gravity, straight to the ground. The amount of adults who by age 30 live with a child was just under 60% in 1983. It is almost 30% in 2023. And you can see that it took a dip there in the mid-80s and then bounced back as we got to the end of the 80s. And then it has been on a precipitous decline ever since. The amount of adults over the age of 30 who own a home was just about, or at age, who by age 30 own a home, I should say. So the amount of adults who by age 30 own a home was right about 50% in 1983. It is approaching 30% in 2023. So when you look at these milestones, out of the first one, live on their own, out of the house, a functional adult. I'm independent. I am now in a position to become a functioning adult member of society. You see that ominous trend line. I have found a spouse worthy of me, that I am worthy of them. And we have made a commitment to one another to try to build a family and be the legacy of the next generation. You see how ominous that trend line is. We then consummated our marriage with children, which is not the only. It's not even, you could argue, even the primary reason for marriage, but it is the primary function of marriage. Is the procreation and rearing and discipling of the next generation. You see the trend line there, a dip and then a bounce back and then a very precipitous dip there. And then you see the same thing with owning a home. That's the most important investment and purchase the vast majority of Americans will ever make or hope to make. You can see a precipitous drop and then a bounce back and then a precipitous drop from there that has lasted well over a decade. This is generational suicide. We're not prepared to be adults. We're not prepared to marry another adult and start a family. We're not prepared to raise another generation of adults. And we're not prepared to make the kind of purchase that is sort of, symbolic of living the American dream. And that is the owning of your own home. And this is why we placed this data in our idolatry or not segment here this week. I think we have to ask how much of this is societal decline, has made achieving these milestones harder than before. How much of it is the decline of our character, integrity, and faith as individuals, and then you start adding that up collectively, is actually what has made this less accessible on a societal basis. I think that's what we have to discuss and analyze here from an idolatry or not perspective. So now that I've laid out this data, gentlemen, your thoughts?
Well, I think it's entirely the latter. There's no excuses for this. What's the earliest date, Steve? How far are we going back on
1983.
1983.
1983. Well, we are very high on our own supply. 83. Listen, Steve and I, although we have different, we don't have the exact same college story. But even for, Steve, after everything he dealt with early on, I think he'll agree with me. The notion of going to college, for me, I went into a big suburban high school in Madison, Wisconsin. Going to college, and I was middle class to upper middle class. It was never a question. That's just what you were going to do. It was a default. I didn't think about it at all, which was a problem. I didn't think about it at all. And a lot of my college experience was very much cruise control. And that describes a lot of people. Out of the gate, 18, my life now, but there's a lot of that. The college class is the ultimately the elites, the so-called leaders, but they're as malleable as ever before. And they're not really thinking about going out and making their way. It is increasingly just keeping up with the Joneses. And do I look like the exact same beige pastel as everybody? And if you have that, no real expectations, there's no strength there. There's no backbone. You get flaccid and flabby. And you, like Judge Robert Bork said, you slouch towards Gomorrah. And that's what you're seeing there. The people didn't set out, the culture didn't set out to be that way, but it started increasingly believing that what Barack Obama wasn't going to come a long time after 1983, but we thought we were the people we've been waiting for.
Yeah, we're 25 years before Obama.
Yeah.
Okay. So you don't get him. He's not a vanguard. He's a harvest.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay. This trend line has to be well into effect before the people elect someone like Barack Hussein Obama as their president. This idea, did he codify trend lines into maybe for the rest of our natural lives, irrevocable government policies and actions and fundamentals? Yes. But this is what I said about the whole cancel the 19th Amendment when you look at the gender gap. All right. Ronald Reagan won women by 24 points in 1984. It's never the laws. It's always the culture. Okay. All Obama did was codify into law, Todd, the cultural trend line of 25 years that predated him. That's all.
Yes.
He could not have gotten elected on. He may have had those exact same ideas when he was Benny Sotoro, at Columbia in 1983. He couldn't have gotten elected to anything other than community organizer in a ward of Chicago with those views. How does he, in 1983, anywhere, how does he get elected president of the United States? Because of the cultural decline. That's why.
Yeah. And so for us to take this seriously, then you have to, because there's far more glaring things that are ultimately the cause of those four graphs. We would need the church. What issue has the church during that time spent the most time preaching and leading on? The men. How do men during that time spend most of their time? The answers are going to be terrible. And that's how you get to those realities. Just like I said, the reality is absolutely on the ballot. I was having this discussion in this election. That's what it's really about. It's the reality of the American people. Are we in New Hampshire? Are we really a live free or die, or do we need to change that motto to bend over and take it just like everybody else? But we've been redefining reality for a very, very long time. There's never been a time. Each generation, Ronald Reagan, my good, he tried to remind us about it's every generation's duty to stand a post. It's not only do we not want to do it, and I am absolutely firm about this based on responses I get, people resent having to do it. Mm-hmm. They want to be coddled. They want the matrix. They really, really do.
I saw this during COVID, Todd. I mean, the work that we collectively did on our show during COVID exploded our audience. Okay. But I really thought that en masse, friends, neighbors. Okay. And I'd hear all kinds of stories from people that were like, oh yes, we told our schools they didn't have to mask anymore. And we told, the parents at the parent meeting that the masks don't work and the jabs don't stop the spread, that they were enraged that you took these idols from them. Yep. They didn't want to be free.
Right.
They were enraged that you were telling them they had to be, or they could, or that they even could be. They were enraged at that. Yeah.
There are two aspects that you can look at this from. And I want to start with the societal or political policy headwinds. I think it's pretty much an iron law of politics, of governance, that which you incentivize or disincentivize, you will get more or less of depending on what you're incentivizing or disincentivizing. Mm-hmm. Are there policies codified into our zeitgeist right now that, let's just pretend every 30-year-old in this country right now just decided, every last one of them decided, I'm going to get independent so that I can attract a spouse, so that we can have children and maybe own a home someday. If every 30-year-old in this country decided that was the goal of their life right now, are there policy headwinds working against them at this very moment? Absolutely there are, in every single aspect. That cannot be that just cannot be disregarded.
Even subtle things, Aaron, like you have to keep your kids on your auto insurance until they're 25
Correct.
Or 26.
Correct.
Even subtle things like that. But
De-incentivizing and incentivizing arrested development, disincentivizing or de-incentivizing getting independent. So that is one aspect of that cannot be ignored, and I don't want us to ignore that. However, if you put a gun to my head and asked me to sum up these charts in one word, I would say pornography, probably. This chart is really, what do we say on this show over and over again? You can tell a lot about the state of a culture by the state of its men. In 1953, 30 years before these charts started, in 1953, Playboy magazine sold 54,000 copies of that magazine for the year. In 2019, 4 years before this chart ends, 80,000 people visited Pornhub every minute. And I think it has everything to do with this chart. And there's different types. I mean, fill in the blank pornography with just addiction to comfort. But I do think it really begins with that, at least when it comes to the men. Why would I get independent so that I could attract a spouse when I've already got a digital upside down version of a spouse. Well, okay, I am independent now. Why would I want to get married? What's the upside for me? Well, why would I want to have kids? I'm already addicted to fill in the blank. Why would I want to own a home? Actually, when just not now baiting suits me in my rental right now. Headwinds, yes, I just talked about those. But I think if you had to sum this up, it's everything about the men. And what you were talking about, Todd, what do they spend their time doing? What do they spend their time obsessing over? I think you have to chalk it up to porn. You look at this was 20 years, 15 years after the sexual revolution when porn kind of became mainstreamed. And you see in the 80s, kind of some of the children of the sexual revolution are starting to become grown up now. It starts to, all of these lines start to drop. And then in the digital age, they drop precipitously. I don't know. Maybe there's a correlation without a causation there. But I think if you put a gun to my head and explain this with one word, that's probably what I would do. Well,
it was 83 would have been about the time almost every American family began to get a VCR for the first time. And you saw the idea that you had to be like Pee Wee Herman in a raincoat to go to the red light district and see that stuff, on that side of town, and fear getting outed kind of went away. And you get that stuff just shipped right to you, mailed to you right there at your own home, or, just go to the back corner of the local video store and go there and get it as well. At the very least, it's part of an overall motif. And I say that as someone that has fought a generational battle against this. So I'm a subject matter expert on this, as many men from this era are. And I was chatting with our buddy Dave Reboy over at Claremont today over text about something totally different. But he said something to me in that conversation, guys, that plays into this conversation. He told me that he knows at least 7 women at his Miami gym that got into porn or to porn via OnlyFans during COVID lockdowns for money, because it's expensive. It's $5-7 a month rent there. It's like New York City. And their jobs and stuff were retail jobs, and other things they were doing that were high end were all shut down. And I thought to myself, this is so readily available for free. So it's that you're now paying for it at that level. I hear stories like OnlyFans models making $100K a month. I don't know how much of that is legend or not. That's not how our generation grew up in Todd and I's era, accessing this stuff. But, so now we're not only, creepers and pervs. We're dumb. We're paying for it at that level when so much of it is just available for free everywhere you go online. That's like a double whammy. We're not only that is idiocracy stuff. Okay, but you want to comment on any of that at all, Todd? What Aaron just mentioned?
Well, I think he's of course right, and I do think there's a rewiring of both the soul spiritually and the brain chemically when you just create a human being that needs these are people who jump off bridges and things like that kind of rush, but they need that kind of hit, and then the rest of their adult male life is spent a combination of
let's just make it very simple. How many great things have been done by men throughout the ages in order to woo and win a woman? And the answer is incalculable. Right? Take that motivation off the table. We just had this conversation about human nature with Ned Ryan last hour. Ned Ryan, right? We have to admit some certain things about human nature. We're sinners. We're fallen. We're broken. So if you start, Aaron, you asked, what are the societal incentives, that even if you wanted to be independent, even if you wanted to cross these milestones, would hold you back, right? Okay. Well, we have within each of us hardwiring already that we're born into that holds us back from these things. Our little granddaughter, Autumn, most adorable thing maybe I've seen in my entire life. Guess what her new thing is, guys? Barely 6 months old. shaking her head no whenever you ask her a question. She can't talk, guys. She just started cooing. 6 months old. Okay? She can shake her head no. At any level of question you ask her, she will shake her head no. Why? Because she's born into the human condition, no matter how adorable she is, as are we all. So if we start removing those incentives, Aaron, in reverse the other way, if the incentives we used to have to rise above our base natures are no longer there, and one of the greatest incentives men had for eons to rise above their base natures was what? To get the girl. Okay? If you start removing those things, all that's left is leave me alone, I'm baiting, right? Pretty much.
Correct.
Unless you are a spirit-filled believer, if those societal incentivizations are removed, all that's left is leave me alone, I'm baiting at that point.
And this was my point. Whether it's video games or toy lightsabers or fantasy football or all that stuff, these are, I remember we had this conversation in a different angle, but I compared these things to pornography because they are passive involvement in the real thing, and you have no plans on actually getting involved or going after the real thing. Even if you don't want it, you just want the Matrix. I want something with no edge to it, no possibility of failure. I just want it, I will always stick color within these lines. That's why I get on these things so much, because if playing Techno Bowl never causes you to go outside and actually tackle your buddy out there, okay? If your toy lightsaber never causes you to go out and fight whatever fight needs to be fought, it's just pornography. And we have adult men addicted to those things now, and I think they were. Just like Aaron said, I think it started with porn, and maybe they're still in that, maybe they're not. But they've created a human being that constantly needs to assault themselves with things that aren't real.
Yes, that's what I was trying to communicate. It's not just the naked women on the screen porn. It is the substitute for real things. And I want to make it clear as well. Pornography, I'm not saying, is the highest upstream big bad here. It was further downstream of something that was fundamentally spiritually broken within the populace of this country. And I think it broke during the sexual revolution. So porn just exacerbated every single spiritual malady that this country had in the aftermath of World War II, coming out of that. I think that was the impetus for what we're seeing in these charts.
Well, and I think, Todd, your broader application that, as we talked about this a few months ago on the show, we watched Rocky movies as kids and then went out and reenacted them. Okay. That doesn't happen anymore. I mean, the idea of just living in this virtual world forever, free of actual experience and therefore free of any kinds of risk or consequences, highly addictive.
Yes.
Back here on the Steve Deace Show, and if you are looking for practical tips of how to keep your family and your marriage on the narrow road here during these chaotic times that we live in, so that you're not one of the statistics that we just cited in our last segment. Our friends at Focus on the Family have been providing these kinds of practical tips and encouragement now for going on a second generation. And the latest iteration is the Focus on the Family with Jim Daly podcast. It's biblically sound advice on marriaging and parenting that is relatable, practical, and genuinely interesting. And it's not just another podcast. What they want to be for your family is a lifeline, so you can listen, learn, and apply in Christ and make a difference in your family's life today. You just go looking for it at focusonthefamilywithjimdaly.com, D-A-L-Y, focusonthefamilywithjimdaly.com. Again, you can start today at focusonthefamilywithjimdaly.com. All right, guys, let's close this out with Pop Culture Tuesday, when we look at the intersection between what we're trying to conserve over here on the right and what is currently trending in pop culture. And obviously the biggest pop culture story in the country right now is he was known as Puff Daddy when Todd and I were growing up. He's P. Diddy now. He's probably known as a hashtag Diddy didn't kill himself here imminently. But there are reports that what is involved with P. Diddy exceeds even Epstein, or is at least on par with Epstein. And again, similar to Epstein, we're not just talking about the trafficking of women here, but now also the trafficking of men, that they were equal opportunity and equal orifice offenders here. And numerous major names and Hollywood stars. We've had ministry figures. Like T.D. Jakes caught up in this as well, of who went to these parties and who was there and who did what's been filmed, what's been not. There have been reports that this was broken because his wife found a vault of things involving just beyond debauched, stuff. We're talking Marquis de Sade kind of stuff. And then she died mysteriously with pneumonia. The family didn't believe it, started alerting authorities, and that's maybe what kicked this entire investigation off. But we know that he is incarcerated as we speak. They are not granting him any bail. He is said to be on suicide watch. We've seen this pattern of events before, right? And at the center of this is a lot of speculation surrounding Justin Bieber. And we have seen several celebrities that were both at different times tight with Justin Bieber and P. Diddy, scrubbing their social media feeds. Usher is one. Usher is said to have signed over guardianship, his own guardianship of Justin Bieber for a time over to Diddy. And by the way, there are some just really uncomfortable. See, I'm not into this celebrity stuff and don't follow any of this. But just some, so I'd not seen the stuff with Pink trying to make out with him. Pink, by the way, scrubbed her social media feed. I didn't see the stuff of, who's the British guy that used to do the late night show? Jim, I don't know his last name, but the guy I'm talking about was supposed to be the nice guy. British guy, did the late show after the Tonight Show on NBC.
Corden.
James Corden, talking about how good he smells for a 16-year-old. I mean, the kind of stuff that, is just, I don't know, man. A lot of it is Katy Perry ass grabbing him, again, as a minor, okay? A lot of these videos are going around right now. I'm sure there's a lot of nervous Nellies out there. J-Lo is said to be among the most nervous. She was Diddy's significant other for a significant amount of time. And that brings into question as well, there have been some odd, I think we'll call it, some odd videos posted on social media the last few weeks by actor Stephen Baldwin. And of course, a lot of you may know that Baldwin is the born-again Christian right wing of the Baldwin brothers. And I used to be a business partner, full disclosure. I used to be in a business relationship with Stephen Baldwin before Todd and Aaron came to work here. We were business partners in helping to get my original radio show off the ground and syndicated before it eventually got taken over by Salem. I've mentioned before the mission trip that I took to Haiti about a decade ago into in really the deep, dark recesses of that country. Well, I took that mission trip with none other than Stephen Baldwin. And they were one of our big radio partners as part of that business relationship as well. So a lot of people now are going back and looking at these videos that Baldwin just started organically putting out here over the last few weeks on social media, wondering if they're code warnings for, he would obviously know. Why? Well, he is Justin Bieber's father-in-law. In fact, I remember when Stephen came over here for dinner one night, when he came to Iowa for the leadership summit, when we were in business together, and he came over here for dinner one night, and my oldest daughter was just, I think his daughter was engaged to Bieber at the time, and so they weren't married yet. And I mean, Anna was just like, holy crap, man, Justin Bieber's future father-in-law is in my house, So he would know, I would imagine, some of the things that may or may not have gone on here. So speculation is rampant here, guys. I've laid out as much as we either know or has been speculated upon throughout every major social media platform in the country right now. I cannot believe they're going to have a trial and let this guy testify and be cross-examined and everything. I just can't believe that. I mean, I can't believe that's why I think, like I said on Friday at the Dace Group, I think hashtag Diddy didn't kill himself is imminent. All right. And he's the main player here. And unlike Ghislaine Maxwell, sending him to prison for sex trafficking to no one, I don't think you can do that with him like you could with Ghislaine, because she was not the proprietor of the operation as Jeffrey Epstein was. But maybe I'm wrong, and maybe that's what'll happen here. But what do you guys think?
Well, yeah, I don't think we're ever going to find out anything about this. The people are too distracted with their bread and circuses. A lot of the circuses are made by people like this, and we keep paying for them and don't ask any questions. But also, you know, there's one side of it you could look at, well, you know, if the left holds some of its own accountable, it buys them, you know, more time. It makes them look more legit. But I mean, I think the darkness is so much worse than this. The biggest reason they can't let this come out is because it's the plan for all of us. All of us are meant to be part of their farm system. Our children, the schools, the grooming, it's not just going to be Justin Bieber, who happens to be some kid with a remarkable amount of talent. And it's this, you know, whatever little club that started off, they had plans to grow and grow and grow. It involves all our children. That's the thing. They can't be guilty now and wake up the people that are ultimately all meant to be absorbed. All of your children, yes, all of your children, which is why they're grooming them, are meant to be available for the sexual fetishes of an elite. This shouldn't be a secret anymore. And the fact that people aren't in on the game anymore, it's going on. This is why New Hampshire transports the kids, the porn in the schools. This is the most chilling thing about all of this. This is not going on while everything else over here is Saturday Evening Post. It's all out in the open now, folks. It's all out in the open. The only thing we don't have is in the names. I mean, really, if we had the names, let's ask. Maybe that's what we need to talk. What would really change? What do we know? What would we know? How would we be informed differently? Because we know that people within this circle are doing this to our kids as we speak. That's the saddest thing about all this. Just knowing the list of names, I don't think is really going to enlighten us that much about the plans. The plans are already out there. We just don't really care. That's the real trick.
So 3 things I think that I didn't realize until this broke that Diddy was a cross-generational, I don't want to say phenomenon, but cross-generational figure, even in you and Todd's generation. So he knows where all the bodies are buried, so to speak. So I think there is some there when it comes to this story in terms of how many people he could implicate. I don't think that's up for debate. I think another thing is true. Right-wing Twitter has been clickbaiting the poop out of this. You know, some people who have deleted their accounts have come back and said, well, my account was hacked, and so we had to get rid of all of the tweets. I think it was it Megan Fox?
Megan Fox.
She never actually used Twitter, and people were saying that she deleted her. So, I mean, this has been a lot of clickbait stuff. I think Stephen Baldwin has an RFK Jr. brainworm. I mean, that video, sometimes you're in the calm before the storm, but sometimes that calm is before a bigger really calm. But then there's not, it was just bizarre. That guy has got a few screws loose. So do all of us. But maybe a few big screws.
You forgot to throw in the bless his heart.
Yeah,
it's a pretty good impersonation, by the way. But
bless his heart. So I actually, okay, clickbaiting the poop out of this, notwithstanding from right-wing Twitter and getting a few things wrong, I'm actually pretty convinced of the Diddy didn't kill himself. Because when you've got a guy that for decades has been a figure in the music industry, and there's just too much smoke with this fire. I'm sorry. There's just too much smoke with this story for me to just say, oh, this is all just an online phenomenon. I
agree, but is the other side overestimating, the degree to which they have already succeeded? And Nefarious is one, and he can write the book and we can know the truth because we're not going to do anything about it. What reality could come out of P. Diddy or Epstein that's going to turn things around?
Nothing. Oh, nothing at all. If anything, this is just a ploy. This is just a ploy from the powers that be to make sure that all the people who are nervous right now and have sweaty palms, make sure that they have complete and total control over the J-Los of the world. This is collateral. This is leverage from the powers that be. So yeah, I don't think that this is going to change the populace at all. Oh no.
The one thing that is fundamentally different from this story than the Epstein story is in this world, you're dealing exclusively with people who are Democratic Party activists and assets. In the Epstein world, there was a lot of crossover appeal there. Okay. And we had everybody from Trump's deceased brother to RFK Jr. flying on his plane, as well as, Bill Clinton and Tom Hanks and everybody else that's on the other side that's been alleged to have at least been on a plane as well. Okay. Or a visitor to the island, but we don't know because nothing's ever been fundamentally or, clarified or not. But on the Epstein side, guys, it's always been assumed, including by me, that the reason why we don't know the list is it's mutually assured destruction here. That I think there's two things for sure about the Epstein list. Okay. That if Trump were on it, regardless of what the mutual assured destruction factor would be, the whole damn list would be exposed to get him. That's number one. Number two is that because of number one, that there's just too many names from both sides of the aisle on the list. And so there's no incentive to come forth because everybody, neither side's inoculated here. That's not going to be true here. And we're talking about a demographic, Black America, that votes anywhere from 85 to 90% Democratic for a generation. We're talking about a genre of music and other things that by and large just isn't connected to the American right on any level whatsoever. It's not like there is, some central figure within country music that was doing some of the things that Diddy is alleged to have been involved in here. So I don't know. We might be, what's today? September 24th? We're almost exactly 4 months before another inauguration. I mean, it's very possible that could be Donald Trump's Department of Justice 4 months from now. You see where I'm going with this, right? There's no blowback here on the right to coming forth and exposing this. There's going to be almost no tentacles to the right in this world, almost none. Maybe and probably absolutely none. So now that I'm verbal processing here, I'm just thinking about this live in real time. There is a part of me that actually thinks maybe we will one day here in not too distant future know more about this than we ever did Epstein, because the mutual assured destruction factor isn't as prevalent here with this as it is with Epstein. Thoughts on that?
Well, maybe not in terms of complicity, guilt, crimes, but in terms of, access to money. We see how corporations are all connected to all manner of DEI and things like that. I just don't sense an appetite for, who are they trying to connect with? The people that we just got done talking about that are slouching towards Gomorrah for all. I mean, to move heaven and earth to release this, what's the return on investment, really? The people that are the idiocracy? And maybe listen, I'm so dead inside that if I'm missing the obvious low-hanging fruit, I'm prepared to be convinced. But I don't know. We all love our absurd fictions. I mean, look at the amount of time the kind of shows, the kind of reality that you're guessing might be there, Steve. Most people turn to entertainment in a fictionalized version on Netflix over and over and over and over again. I trying to imagine what's going to be there that's going to cause everybody to on any level, the elites, the normies, whatever. And which I think I'm being faithful to revival or bust by saying that.
Yeah, so in terms of pop culture versus the world of finance, there is an opportunity for a lot more collateral damage with the former rather than the latter. Now, of course, people knew the politicians, some of the bigger name politicians associated with Jeffrey Epstein. But everybody except for maybe 11 million new illegal aliens in this country in the last 4 years knows of somebody, pop culture-wise, directly associated with Diddy. Okay? So I think in terms of the collateral damage of what this could come about, much bigger than, I mean, nobody knows the names of Joe Blow, financier on Wall Street that might have done stuff with Jeffrey Epstein. Nobody knows that. It doesn't really matter to people. Probably doesn't matter. It probably won't matter to people, that J-Lo or Justin, these figures connected with Diddy. It probably won't matter at the end of the day, but people will know about them. People will know about these figures. Will it actually impact them on any level? I don't know. Probably not.
That's a valid point, though, to counter what I said. Are there major recording executives that could be GOP donors?
Yeah.
That, knew about this and just looked the other way because they were all making money. And so there is some mutually assured destruction factor to the right then. That's possible.
Look at your Dave Riaboy story. Just by being a dude who wants to stay healthy and goes to the gym, he happens to know 7 OnlyFans stars. I mean, this is the water.
Yeah. We're going to stick around and we're going to dive deep into what's happening on the ground in Pennsylvania in this election in our overtime. For the rest of you, we'll see you tomorrow. Until then, Romans 8:28.